Hey, it's a fresh Monday morning, and courtesy of Capital Legacy, your #1 provider of wills and estate administration, we take a look at business. A bit of a different business report this morning from Chris Gibbons. He's been hammering on about a whole lot of books that he's been reading that are associated in some way with business or give some sort of insights. So let's say good morning to Chris Gibbons, and Chris, unleash your library at us. This is your stage.
Morning, Jeremy. Thank you for the opportunity, I should say. What's the best business book I've read so far this year? Straightforward question. Tough question. We spoke about one a couple of weeks ago, Noise by Daniel Kahneman, Olivier Sibony and Cass Sunstein. That was excellent, but you know what? In terms of sheer usefulness, I would have to give the prize so far this year to a book called Working Backwards: Insights, Stories and Secrets from Inside Amazon by two chaps called Colin Breyer and Bill Carr, published by Macmillan, 338 Rand. Why do I fancy this book as top book of the year? Well, let's start with the fact that Breyer and Bill Carr were both very big dogs at Amazon for some 27 years, most of those in the truly formative period of the company, between roughly 1998 and 2011. Breyer spent 2 of those years as shadow to founder Jeff Bezos, with him every hour of the working day, in every meeting, privy to every thought. Carr worked one level down, but still built and ran key components of Amazon's businesses. In Working Backwards, they start with a very simple 2-part question. How did Amazon and Bezos do it? Why are they so successful in so many different areas? Retail, Amazon Web Services, digital media, all of that stuff. And this, by the way, was a real question to the authors from the CEO of a Fortune 100 company. How is Amazon so successful? They reveal that Amazon's developed and refined an architecture of internal processes and practices which are adhered to with almost religious tenacity. Their book is simply a guide, a breakdown if you'd prefer, of what these practices are, how they're used at Amazon, and how you could certainly take some of these practices, or all of them, and use them inside your own company. What you will not realize until you get into the book is just how different these things are at Amazon when compared to more traditional companies. More importantly, you'll see just how blindingly obvious and commonsensical they are, yet how very difficult they can be to implement. At the center of the architecture are 14 leadership principles, and it's a list that could probably have been compiled by an ordinary MBA class at a business school, with things like customer obsession in the #1 spot, followed by things like hire and develop the best, insist on highest standards, deliver results. All very bog standard, but you might begin to understand what these mean as you get into the book. Under customer obsession, we learn that this means leaders start with the customer and work backwards. They work vigorously to earn and keep customer trust, and although leaders pay attention to competitors, they obsess over customers. So what does that mean? Obsess is the key word here. If you have a new idea or a product to develop, the first thing you do is write the final press release and an accompanying list of frequently asked questions, the FAQs. And in this way, the product development process is seen through the customer's eyes right from the get-go. And it's refined accordingly. The PR FAQ circulated to your peers, to your superiors, even to your subordinates, who all try as hard as they can to pick it to pieces, to tear it to shreds. And this is literally working backwards. It is the title of the book. Insist on the highest standards. Well, that again sounds bog standard, sounds obvious until you learn that part of the process involves a ban on all PowerPoint presentations. Hooray! Something I've been arguing about for years and years and years. But at Amazon, you start off by taking 6 A4 pages. You're allowed no more than 6. It has to be, and you type out on the 6 A4 pages your idea, your proposal, or what the point you've been asked to bring up at the meeting. And at the start of the meeting, everybody shuts up, turns their phones off, and they read through your 6-pager. And that way, you're getting about 7, 8, 9, 10 times as much information as you would from an ordinary PowerPoint presentation. It just lays the whole PowerPoint thing bare. And that's one of the reasons discussions about new ideas at Amazon are so much more nuanced. so much richer than an ordinary PowerPoint presentation. The chapter on how Amazon hires new staffers, that in itself is a process called raising the bar. That alone is worth the price of this book. And I just wish that I had owned a copy of Working Backwards when I started on my own business journey a long, long time ago. All right, that's Working Backwards about Amazon. What about on the local front? What do we have there? One that's caught my eye here is from Jonathan Ball Publishers, and when it landed, I thought I wasn't going to like it. I gave it a quick look just to check, and suddenly I was hooked. It's called Fortunes, The Rise and Rise of Afrikaner Tycoons. It's by Ebba Domissa, Jonathan Ball Publishers, 310 Rand. Now, as former editor-in-chief of Die Burger, Ebba Domissa is ideally placed to catalogue the life, the times, and the outsized fortunes of a group of Afrikaner millionaires and billionaires, many of whom are now household names. Johan Rupert, Chris Wiese, Whitey Basson, Yanni Mouton, and of course, Koos Becker of Naspers, to name just a few. He would have watched their empires grow in parallel with his own career. I have no doubt he knows many of them personally. Domissa is far too polished a journalist to allow any of that to intrude, though. His writing is dry, it is factual, it is studded with revealing detail. I had not, as I say, expected to enjoy Fortunes, but I found myself drawn quite rapidly into the histories of these titans of the South African business world. And nor is that description hyperbole. Johan Rupert took an already considerable business inherited from his father Anton, turned it into one of the two biggest luxury conglomerates in the world. Koos Becker, through Chinese internet giant Tencent, made what is widely acknowledged as one of the greatest internet investments ever. Yanni Mouton built PSG from scratch after being fired from a stockbroking business in Johannesburg, and so on and so forth. They've all been richly rewarded for their efforts, but that's no more than their due, I think. Or, well, almost all, because no account of this kind would be complete without the inclusion of Steinhoff. That's it, Steinhoff International and Marcus Jooste. Jooste's empire grew so far, so fast, and so fabulously that he managed to entice investments from Visa, the likes of first-round group founder G.T. Ferreira. Ferreira's foray into Steinhoff, by the way, cost him over R1 billion. Visa has lodged a claim against that company for 59 billion rand. Domissa pulls no punches. He describes Jooste as a corporate psychopath and the master of con men. So if you're looking for a straightforward how they did it, or just a guide to a dominant sector of South African business, Fortunes will not let you down. Now, Jeremy, when I'm in a bookshop, I often try and find something that explains things to me, explain things that that I don't really fully understand, or I know a little bit about and need more broader knowledge, let's put it that way. Deepen my knowledge about a particular facet of business. Not quite a textbook, but something that has some meat to it, if you get my meaning. What's Wrong with Economics by Robert Skidelsky, published by Yale at 280 Rand, is one such book. Skidelsky is Emeritus Professor of Political Economy at the University of Warwick in the UK. His latest book begins with a very simple question of economics in its neoclassical form is such an exact science. How come the vast bulk of its proponents missed the Great Recession of 2008? Why were the legions and legions of economists employed by the endless array of financial and educational institutions unable to see it coming, even less able to do anything about it while it was unfolding, and why more than a decade later are those same experts still bickering about the fallout? So, an important question, I think. At the heart of Skidelsky's analysis is the contention that economics has come to be obsessed with physics. In the natural world, there are laws which can be proven mathematically and which are immutable. And for much of the 20th century, a string of Nobel Prize winning economists, beg your pardon, have attempted to reshape their discipline as just such a science, with a similar set of unchangeable rules, all hinged on the assumption that there is such a creature as the rational individual whose choices will always ensure that markets, free markets of course, will always return to equilibrium, okay? On this foundation, the prediction of the future becomes possible. Except, as we all know, even most of the economists among us, forecasting what might happen tomorrow, let alone 12 months or 12 years into the future, is a battlefield littered with spectacular and expensive casualties. Skidelsky's argument is that to rebuild economics into something vaguely useful requires a re-examination of its roots as a social science. Here, there is no such creature as Homo economicus, making his supposedly rational decisions. Instead, there are groups of people with different beliefs and practices and habits, capable of all acting very differently in the future from the way they've acted in the past. History, ethics, morality, politics, all need to be added into the mix, according to Skidelsky, and then only might we arrive at a place where economics thinks about human behavior under varying conditions of knowledge, I'm quoting here, and does not take the easy mathematical route to prediction. It is a fascinating book. I learned a lot from it. It gets a highly recommended tag. Now, down here on the southern tip of Africa, we're still a very large player on the continent of Africa. So let's talk a little bit about business in Africa. Well, a book that's not strictly about business, but I think it's one you need to read if you're thinking about heading north to do business in a country that's often heralded as one of the continent's great success stories. I'm talking about Rwanda. The book is called Do Not Disturb. It's by writer and journalist Michaela Wrong, published by HarperCollins, 300 Rand. Its hook is the murder on New Year's morning of 2014 of a former head of Rwandan external intelligence, Patrick Karegeya, found strangled in his room in the Michelangelo Hotel in Johannesburg. You may remember that case. Do Not Disturb, the book's title, comes from the Do Not Disturb sign hanging outside room 905 at the hotel where Karegeya's body was found. Do bear in mind that this is a book really charting the birth of Rwanda, where Rwanda came from, where President Kagame in particular came from, and how after 1994, after the genocide, he consolidated power, and one by one, most of the people around him at that point, including Karegeya, have turned against Kagame, they've fled Rwanda, and a number of them have been assassinated, including Karegeya. It is a book which will fill you in about that part of Africa, about the tribalism, the Hutus and the Tutsis. Kagame, of course, a Tutsi, former aristocrats of that region. A bit of history with it, but it really does say to me you need to be very, very careful indeed if you're heading up in that part of the world, heading to Rwanda, because all is not as it seems, and if you cross President Kagame, well, let's just say that a number of people who have crossed him have met a very sticky end indeed. So you have been warned. Now, one that is quite unusual, just checking the amount of time we've got here, yep, quite unusual, I think, is called Make Brilliant Work by Rod Judkins, published by Macmillan at 340 Rand. It's not your average business book, but that's because Rod Judkins is not your average business writer or consultant. Instead, he is a lecturer at Central St. Martin's in London, a legendary art school, which has produced, among others, Lucian Freud, Stella McCartney, Alexander McQueen. And Judkins' starting point is how to unlock your creativity and turn that into success. And he says you can do this in business just as you can in the art world. Now, creativity here means the kind of creativity deployed by great artists down the ages, including Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Picasso, Salvador Dali, all of whom have cameo appearances in Make Brilliant Work. But so too do filmmakers like Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, with architects like Zaha Hadid and Philippe Starck. Stuck for inspiration or an idea? Well, Judkins says simply go back in history and copy a genius from a very different era, which is what Scorsese did for his 1973 film Mean Streets, absolute classic. His inspiration came from the 17th century painter Caravaggio, famous for his gritty realism and chiaroscuro shadows. Want to get your work noticed? Don't overprice it and get as much of it out there as you possibly can. And that's what Pablo Picasso did very early in his career. Or perhaps you could try doing the wrong thing in the right place, which is what the Jaguar car company did in the 1960s. They wanted a new car that was not the same as all the others, rolling off all the identical and boring assembly lines all over the world. So they hired not a car designer, but someone who designed aircraft. His name was Malcolm Sayer, and he delivered one of the most lauded sports cars in history, the E-Type Jaguar. Judkins has structured the book in a way that each idea is contained in 3 or 4 very digestible pages with a couple of bullet points at the end for easy reference. The fact that it's easy reading doesn't mean it's low value. Far from it. I found Make Brilliant Work thought-provoking And Jeremy, I found it inspirational. Now, time running against us. We have a minute or two left, I think. At the start of this episode, we referred briefly to a book we've already covered from a previous show, Noise by Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner. For those who might have missed it, let's just quickly remind ourselves, how do we make decisions which are calls of judgment? What influences the decision-making process in our brain? How likely are those decisions to be accurate, or at least as accurate as possible? These are important questions which, both the business context, to say nothing of the personal, can have ramifications worth millions of rand. Fair chance you would have come across Daniel Kahneman's earlier work, the one which really propelled him to international fame, Thinking Fast and Slow. You're probably familiar with the concepts in there related to decision making, judgment, like bias, anchoring, framing, those kind of things. Those have been much written about, they're well researched, but much less so is what Kahneman and his colleagues Sibony and Sunstein call noise. The title of the book, Noise in Public Conversation, about human error and in organizations. I'm quoting again from the book here, all over the world, noise is rarely recognized. Bias is the star of the show. Noise is a bit player, usually off stage. This book is our attempt to redress the balance, unquote. What is noise? Noise is the assortment of random background variables which cause us to make different judgments about the same set of facts. Noise is why different doctors will make different judgments about a patient's condition. It's why a judge will hand down a harsher sentence just before lunch when he or she is tired and hungry. Noise is why you or I will make a decision different from today's after we have slept on it. I found it absolutely fascinating how we make decisions. Noise by Nobel Prize winner and two very distinguished academics. And Jeremy, that I think is about all we have time for on this edition of the show. So back to you.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I've just worked out now, I don't even know if I should be thanking you, because you've cost me around about 100 Rand a minute just by describing those books. If I add up the totals, and I have to go out and buy them, which I have to do now, because they all sound absolutely fascinating. So thank you for costing me that.
Entirely my pleasure.
Chris Gibbons, he'll be back with us again next Monday. Thank you for watching this podcast. If you did like it, then please subscribe. That's it from the Mansfield Today team. We'll be with you tomorrow once again with legal matters with Advocate Lance Brogden. Until then, bye-bye.